Good evening, everyone. I am going to talk from a poem by Zen Master Bon Soeng. Zen Master Bon Soeng lived, let's say he was born in the later part of the 1800s, and he lived till 1946, 1947. If you might be interested, if you look on the back wall, his picture is, as we look at it, to the right. And he was Zen Master Bon Soeng, whose picture is over there. He was his grand teacher. So 2 generations up from Zen Master Bon Soeng. And I'm sure Zen Master Bon Soeng lived at many different temples. Much of his life I don't know about. But for part of his life, he lived at a hermitage called Jung-hae Sa. And I went and visited there. And I want you to imagine that in Korea, they build temples not up at the top of the mountain, but a little way up a mountain. But the mountains form like an amphitheater, you could imagine, and the temple would sit right in the middle of that with water in the distance, so that the energy is held by the mountains and it goes outward. So Sudoksa is below the temple, and it's one of the main Zen temples in Korea. And then they call this a hermitage above Sudoksa, which is Jung-hae Sa. But to call it a hermitage would probably you would misunderstand, because it's not just one building, it's a series of buildings. Think of it more as a small temple. And there's a lovely set of stairs, long set of stairs that go up from Sudoksa to Jung-hae Sa. So the Zen master at the temple before Bon Soeng, I don't know if it was just prior to Bon Soeng or 1 or 2 before, had a project it's almost like a life project of building these stairs from Sudoksa up to Jung-hae Sa. And it was his life's work as he was the spiritual leader of this temple, which is, again, it's a very large temple. He also presided over the building of these steps going all the way up. This was early in the 19th century, in the 20th century, so cars were invented and cars were just becoming in fashion, I suppose you could say. And this Zen master resisted the building of a road up to Jung-hae Sa. He built these lovely stairs, and it was at his direction there would be no road going up to Jung-hae Sa. I would be exaggerating to say the day he died, but very, very soon after he died, the first thing that happened is they built a road for cars to go up to the top of the mountain. And when I heard this story, it reminded me of living through the time that Chairman Mao died in China. And for someone of my age, Chairman Mao was a very important historical figure, and he did so much to shape what seemed to be China. And what struck me very soon after he died, with a few twists and turns, is China completely changed. And it showed me how, no matter how powerful, no matter how much political, military, or any other kind of power, we're all limited in our influence. We all believe in a sense of the permanence of things, but very quickly permanence turns to impermanence and things change. So this Zen master on this mountain had such a strong opinion and view that everybody followed him. But as soon as he died, something else happened. So as I'm saying this, I'm also reminded of the end of the Soviet Union, where, again, for someone my age, it was just a permanent fixture of reality. And to see it disappear as quickly as it did was a reminder that what we think is permanent is just a conceptual idea, that nothing is permanent, and you never really know when something's going to change or how it's going to change. So this actually is an important Zen teaching. It's in a way at the very base of Zen teaching is the fact that we don't have as much control as we think we have, and things will change in ways that we would never imagine, and we have our influence, but it's quite limited actually, and whatever it is that we do, whatever it is that we think is so important, even that will disappear. And when you go from the beginning premise of Buddhism of the First Noble Truth that life is suffering, the teaching is that we suffer because of impermanence. We suffer trying to hold on to something, believing that we can fix things, and by fix I mean make them stationary. But the earth is always spinning, the wind is constantly blowing, and time is moving forward, and things are always in flux. Our own difficulty with dealing with that flux in many ways ends up making matters worse. The attempts that we make to hold things stationary when their nature is to move ultimately create suffering not only for ourselves, but if there are other life forms involved, the suffering that gets created for the other life forms and are trying to control, manipulate, and make fixed something that is constantly in flux. So much of what our practice is about is finding some stable foundation to be able to hold change, rather than to stop change or to control how things change. What we're doing is creating a center that can keep us grounded and connected to our lives without trying to control and hold it. So we have this practice that we just did tonight, which is an example of what we do here at the Zen Center, as how we're actually not from a conceptual idea, but from an actual lived practice, training to be able to work with change and find our footing in the midst of change. So, and I might just say, to preface this, this book, The Whole World is a Single Flower, is the main text that we use in our school for what we call our Kongan practice. Those of you who know the Japanese system better, you call it koan practice. And as different from Japan and the Japanese lines, we use the ancient Chinese stories as koans or kongans, but we also use Taoist stories, we use some Christian stories, and what I'm going to read from is a Zen poem that Zen Master Bon Soeng wrote, and we also use this as a kongan. So I will read the poem, I'll read the 3 questions that we ask about this poem, I'll read some commentary, and then I'll give some commentary on the poem. So this poem is called Prajna Ship by Zen Master Bon Soeng. Everything is impermanent, but there is truth. You and I are not two, not one. Only your stupid thinking is non-stop, already alive in the Prajna Ship. I'll read it one more time. Everything is impermanent, but there is truth. You and I are not two, not one. Only your stupid thinking is non-stop, already alive in the Prajna Ship. Prajna means wisdom. First question. Everything is impermanent, but there is truth. What does that mean? And just as a teaching point before I go further, when we ask what does that mean, we're not asking for explanation. Koan practice or Kangan practice is not about explaining some idea. It's about showing me right now. So if I ask the question, everything is impermanent, but there is truth, I don't want to hear a story like I just told about impermanence. I want you to show it to me right now. So when you're answering a Kangan, you have to actually find what the question that's being asked is. So what does it mean? What does what mean? And then you find that, and without really any hesitation, you express it. You show it. You make it alive. Okay, so first question. Everything is impermanent, but there is truth. What does this mean? Second question. You and I are not two, not one. What does this mean? Third question. Already alive in the Prajna Ship. What does this mean? Commentary. And this commentary is written by Zen Master Bon Soeng. What do you see now? What do you hear now? Everything appears clearly in front of you. Sometimes the answer, quote unquote, answer to the Kangan is in the commentary. This one is not quite so simple. You can't read the commentary and actually know what to do, but he is pointing to something. So listen to what he says in response to the poem. What do you see now? What do you hear now? Everything appears clearly in front of you. So I'm going to take this poem line by line, talk a little bit about each line, and then we'll open up for questions and for comments. Everything is impermanent, but there is truth. So I've already begun talking about this problem of impermanence. Things are always changing. We fix ideas and beliefs on things, and as soon as we finish fixing them, they're different. We talk about what is this moment. As soon as we say what it is, it's gone. Things are always changing. People we love leave, sometimes by their own choice, sometimes by death. Death is a fixture of human life. We do our best to deny it, to pretend it's not there, to keep ourselves safe from it. But in fact, it's always a split second away. For those of us who are younger, we like to believe that, yeah, it's there, but it's going to be there at some other time. But if you think about your life, you think about people you've known or people in the public eye, you know that people die at every point of existence. Some babies never make it out of the womb. Some never make it out of infancy. I remember when I was in elementary school, there was a girl who always seemed a little bit sick. And then one day she didn't come to school and she died. And I've told this before, but I was on a long retreat one time and I spent a day with death, kind of looking at my life and noticing that at every step of the way, somebody died. There is no permanence. Things are always changing. Things are always disappearing. But Zen Master Bon Soeng throws in a little kicker then. He says, but there is truth. Everything is impermanent, but there is truth. So another question could be asked is, what is this truth? What actually is true? You have to look past your conceptual beliefs and ideas to find truth. I heard at one point that some scientists were trying to do an experiment to discover how long a moment actually was. And I can't really speak to their methodology, but my memory said they came up with something like 0.025 seconds was a moment. Zen Master Bon Soeng would talk about 1 divided by infinity. is a moment. Another time he would describe a moment as, if you watch a movie, the movie is always moving, obviously, that's why we call it a movie, and it seems to be in action. But if you stop the projector but leave the light on, there's one frame. That one frame gets us close to this idea of truth. Many of you have come here, you know we have this teaching tool. This hit stops time and space in an instant. Then we say, what do you see now? What do you hear now? What do you smell now? What do you taste now? All these things bring you back to truth. It's not conceptual, it's an alive experience. So in his commentary, Zen Master Soeng says, what do you see now? What do you hear now? If you're seeing, and if you're listening, and you're not adding conceptual thought to it, you're getting close to truth. So we hit as a way of, in a sense, pushing the clear button on a calculator, returning to zero. If I walk into this room angry and I don't, then my talk is going to be laced with the anger that I'm holding. But if I can hit that clear button, return back to zero, it's possible at least that I can get out from behind that anger and just express what's naturally happening right now. What I'm angry about isn't what's happening in this room. We all know the situations that we have in our lives that cause us stress, unhappiness, sometimes anger, sometimes despair. We carry those stories in our conceptual thought. Something happens that may be bad enough. How we relate to what happens is often creating much more suffering than the thing itself. The one slap on the shoulder or on the arm is bad enough, but the fury that grows out of the indignation that you would think you have the right to do that to me amplifies that pain, let's just say manyfold. I may not be able to stop you from slapping my arm, but once I'm slapped, the experience is mine. How I relate to it and what I do with it is the purview of our practice. To become aware of our tendencies, to become aware of how it is that we carry our thoughts and feelings and beliefs and ideas, and how that impacts our very life in this very moment, is what we're uncovering in our Zen practice. I'm not suggesting that in our formal Zen practice we should be thinking about that, but I am suggesting that we should be, and we can be, observing how that happens in our consciousness. We can use our practice, our meditative practice, our chanting practice, any kind of practice. We use it to hone our ability to be able to perceive the stimulus and then the response to the stimulus. If you think about how you react to things every moment and every day, very often we don't even know why we started reacting this way. We easily forget the thing that began the train of thought and feeling because we get so lost in that train of thought and feeling. So we're practicing to break that down, to come back to this very moment, to clearly see everything that's appearing right in front of us. So in the second line, he says, you and I are not two, not one. Conventionally, we think, I am here, you are there. I am one, you are two. But the poem says we're not one and we're not two. Or actually says we're not two, we're not one. There aren't 2 of us, there aren't 12 of us, there aren't 20 of us, there aren't 7 billion of us. Are we one or are we many? This line serves to help create great doubt. It's pushing right at our conventional idea. I am here, you are there. I am one, you are two. Together we are a community of separate beings. But how separate are we really? Where do I end and you begin? Is it at the surface of our skin? And inside this bag of bones and blood and pus and rotting flesh and all the rest, what is me and what is not me? Are the bacteria that fill my gut me or not me? If they weren't there, I couldn't digest food, I'd be dead. But they're not human. So what am I? And what are we? What is one? What is many? This one simple line raises all these questions. In Zen practice, we start with the question. What am I? What is this? We have our ideas, our beliefs, our sense of self. But is that who we are? We start our practice from a position of doubt. Not self-doubt. Am I good enough? Does that person like me? I better be careful about how I speak because they may not like it and I may get rejected. That's self-doubt. What we're talking about here is great doubt. The kind of doubt that a scientist may have it with the scientific method. If I'm going to do an experiment, I need to start off with the recognition that I don't know. And I have to be careful about putting my thumb on the scale and biasing my perspective. It's that kind of mind. Open, observant, clear, and not attached to an outcome. Those are easy words for me to say. My years of practice have taught me how difficult it is to live a life that's that open, that flexible, that willing to be unsure. I like to talk about it as living with a sense of curiosity and wonder, rather than certainty and manipulation, to live our lives from a place of curiosity and wonder and the ability to be surprised and to be moved by what's happening right now. Easy to say, hard to do. This next line may be my favorite line in this entire book. Only your stupid thinking is nonstop. He's not being critical. He's not calling us all jerks for having this stupid thinking. He's doing a few things with this line. One of the things he's doing is trying to stop our minds. In a 4-line Zen poem, this third line is the line that stops us. Now I don't understand anything. I would say that he's pointing to the fact that we're driven by our conceptual framework, that we mistake our conceptual ideas and beliefs and opinions and neediness, the whole egoic structure that we have, we mistake that for who we are. That false structure is held up by this, what he's calling stupid thinking. And remember, in the Asian tradition, thinking includes feeling. It's not so separate. So sometimes we Westerners, we like to say, well, maybe my thinking is off, but my feelings are the truth. Well, there is something that we get closer to when we connect with our feelings and we drop out of our thought process into our feeling process. But even from the feelings, we all know this, I react one way. I have one feeling to something that you have some other feeling for. Just what I might like the most, you might hate the most. And so feeling might tell me something about my conceptual framework. It might really help me get deeper and closer to understand how it is my conceptual framework operates. But it doesn't get me past my conceptual framework. So this thought-feeling construct holds up. The thinking and feeling holds it all up. When our thoughts change, our reality changes. It's one of the reasons why maybe a drug experience or some traumatic experience or some shock to the system can change everything. It can change the trajectory of our lives. I'm not sure that Paul said it, but maybe he said that I'm also a psychotherapist. And one of the things I notice when I work with people is that with some people, if they've never had something, let's say they never had a deep love connection with their parents, let's say, that's traumatic. And then their lives are built off of that trauma. But sometimes they have it and then they lose it. And that's a different kind of damage. That's a different kind of trauma, sometimes even deeper. That they've gone along and everything was great and suddenly a parent dies. Of course, everything is great is a generalization. But then that loss of the attachment has a different kind of impact. Each one of us has our own combination of experiences that creates this ego structure, I suppose you could say, that we're holding up with our thoughts and feelings. If we mistake that for truth, we're lost in our own fantasy world. And that's what the Buddha pointed to very early on in his teaching, that we live in the fantasy of our own reality. And what we're looking is to be shaken out of that, to be able to be present. Feel the breeze as it comes through the room. And if it's really hot, to feel the discomfort or the experience of the heat that we turn into discomfort. So by saying only your stupid thinking is nonstop, he's bringing us to this point. Suddenly we wake up. The next line in a 4-line Zen poem points to life as it is and how we can live. Conceptually, I can say from an enlightened point of view, from an awakened point of view. And in this line, he says, already alive in the Prajna Ship, in the wisdom ship. We already have it. The Buddha's enlightenment wasn't about him getting something that he didn't have. His awakening was about returning to what he already was. Just as our own awakening isn't becoming somebody else, it's truly becoming our own nature and expressing that with wisdom, love, and compassion. So, how is it that we live in this world? What do we do? What is it that we bring to each moment? How is it that we respond to the very varied and different moments that occur just within an hour? How do we respond, and how do we meet the moment that we're actually living? And to me, this is the most important place in our practice, And this is where we truly become alive. We return to who we are and we express it. Using this great doubt, using this great question, getting comfortable in the impermanence of things, and a willingness to stand right smack in the middle of it. Be buffeted by the winds and the rain and the snow and the lightning and the heat and even the desperation. To sit right in the middle of it and to express ourselves in a way that brings some comfort or some aid to actually be able to bring the world closer to a world of wisdom, compassion, love, and empathy. It's not a concept, it's a lived moment, moment to moment to moment. We're training to be alive and present in our lives. That's what he means by already alive. Not tomorrow, not when you finally get it the day before you die, right now. Each one of us already has it. Each one of us already is it. It's our job to find it and to live it. And that's, to me, the meaning of Zen practice. The practical but profound nature of living a life of practice. So I hope we can all take some of this wisdom. Not imagine that one day we'll learn it enough so we can do it, but to really recognize right now, we're already alive. We already have it. And all we need to do is express it. Find it, be it, and do it. Sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes you fail. Of course, we all like to succeed much more than we like failure. But either way, learn from your experience. Your wisdom will grow, your compassion will grow, your ability to give that to the world will grow stronger and more deep.